Thank you for joining. We'll get started shortly. Stand by. Okay, we're going to get started. So, thank you for joining today for another great session on data privacy for public cloud. Uh, this is a topic that's getting a lot of attention because of all the privacy laws, and people want to know how to govern the data in a dispersed, complex public cloud environment. So we're going to get into that architecture. We're going to talk about the problem statement, and we're going to talk about how we're going to create this governance process and actually give you some tools and workflows to be able to execute on that strategy. So data is the new currency, and you certainly want to protect it wisely. So from an agenda perspective, we're going to talk about how to protect the data through governance in a multi-cloud environment, not just one cloud. And overall data governance best practices, what are they? And where and how to start quickly. And also, we're going to talk about some cloud native tooling in this area that can help you a bit. And then, of course, our own platform that does the overall governance and overall tracking of the data sources and their status and so on and so forth. So, uh, my name is Kamran Mehboob. I'm the Director of Product Management here at Cloudnosis. I work with many customers, and it's been an interesting growth space for us. Just one quick housekeeping. This session is being recorded, so you should be having access to it at the end of the session. So keep that in mind. Okay, and if there's any questions along the way, definitely do put it in the chat box, and I'll try to answer it interactively as I move forward. Okay, so cloud data governance and overall protection. Overall, from a definition perspective, it's really a set of processes that ensures important data sets are formally managed. That's really what it is. From an audit perspective, you need to be able to prove that. And what it takes to make that happen is you need to have visibility and control over the process and also have remediation from an accountability standpoint be in place as well. So all three are required for data governance: visibility, control, and remediation. You need to be able to fix things quickly as they come up. And it ensures that the data can be trusted and the creators are made accountable for its quality. So it's important to understand that people are taking ownership of that. Think of it like a shared security model and shared ownership model. It's the same principle. So what is the business case for data governance? Why you should be caring about this? The biggest one is, well, two biggest ones are regulatory fines. So there's a lot of privacy laws in place now from I mean that's globally. Most of the nations, they have some form of privacy laws in place, and you need to be able to protect yourself and defend yourself for any lawsuits. And the second is reputation loss. So if that private data is released by accident or that is through malicious attack, you definitely want to lose reputation of your company. And of course, the end result is customer trust is being lost, and and you could have loss in revenue. So huge business case for this, everything from regulatory to uh, reputation loss, and certainly want to boost employee productivity as well if you can get a good understanding of your data and kind of organize it better. Okay, so cloud data challenges, what are they, and what's the overall characteristics in the multi-cloud dispersed environment? So you may have a typical situation like this where you have quite a few public clouds. You may even have a private cloud as well connected across the board, and data sharing is going on between clouds. Um, Four things to remember about cloud and data in general. There's a lot of volume, okay, from a sizing perspective, terabytes of data. There's a lot of variety of the data. The variety means it's in the S3 buckets, it's in DynamoDB, it's in RDS, it's in Elastic Cache. So all these different pieces and services of the cloud vendor, that's where the data is sitting. So that's why I said having inventory and visibility is very, very important. There's a lot of velocity to the data, meaning that it changes quickly and it goes from one form to another, and it's constantly moving, within different components. And you have services that are being turned off and turned on, and new services are being created. Someone goes in, creates an S3 bucket, they start putting in data in there and start building applications. Your job as a data governance lead is to figure out, is the data private, is the S3 bucket secured, and is it kept secured and tagged and monitored and so on and so forth, and there's a lifecycle policy on it. And disparity is meaning that it's in different clouds, even within the same cloud. It could be in different types of services, as I mentioned earlier. So as you can see, it's a pretty complex problem, and it's not for a human to constantly manage this. You're going to need automation and some software tooling to manage this whole flow. So you're not alone. You have to come up with a change management and a data governance stakeholders in place, so you can monitor these different pieces across the board and be able to report back up to the folks that are taking responsibility for it. So there's a quick matrix that we have that tells you what are some of the things you need to worry about. Everything from data dictionary to cataloging, understanding lineage, where it came from, and stewardship and profiling. So all these different areas, and you have different folks you can assign to that. Some of the acronyms are on the right. So chief data officer, chief information officer. Everybody in the flow are responsible, and there's also a chief protection officer. Different names people give, but you need to have some kind of organization structure in place to be able to manage that. Moving forward, data inventory is very, very important. So in the entire slide set, just from a starting point, you should be able to answer the what's on the right if you're going to do any governance at all, at minimum. So I'm going to start from the left side, which is today's data center. Well, you know where everything is, you know where it's located, there's admins and control access available, and the auditors have been happy with it because that's what they're used to seeing. Okay, and your security team is aware how to manage that. That's a decade of experience. Well, now you shift over to this virtual world of multiple clouds and multiple data sources. Now you need to ask those same set of questions again. Who has the control? Where is it located? Where is it stored? Who backs it up? Who has access to it? And how resilient is it? Is there disaster recovery? Is there versioning? Is there life cycle attached to it? How do auditors observe this whole process? Okay. And how does our security team engage with this entire process? So all these who, what, when, where, why, you need to answer. And that's what data governance is all about. And we're going to help you, who has control of the data, where is it located, finding it, okay, through searching tools and discovery tools, and where is it stored and how is it stored and how is it backed up. So all these policies cloud vendors have on their data sources. It's your job to manage those policies. It's your job to know at an instant snapshot today, right now, what are those policies and which databases has PII data and so on and so forth. And again, if you guys have any questions along the way, you can add it into your chat box and I'll be happy to answer along the way. Okay. So three steps to success. We try to simplify it by saying discover, monitor, and protect. Okay, for your data governance strategy. You need to have a way to discover what's out there. Okay, and also understand where is your confidential data sitting. There are multiple tools available where you can scan your files and databases to find the PII data and then mark it with a tag. Okay, and then you'll be able to control and manage the life cycle of it. And then you need, once you know where those data sources are, then you need to ask the question, who's using it? Who has access to it? Okay, is the access broad? Is the access tight? Is there a business case to have access available to so many people? And the third one is how best to prevent its loss. Okay, how do you protect it? Yes, encryption is a good thing. That's a starting point. Being able to protect that the bucket is not open to the world, looking at all of its configurations, and making sure that you have a tight configuration process that it can protect its loss. Okay, so those are the three key things that you need to keep in mind. Well, you must be saying, well, yeah, okay, this is no big deal. I know that. How do I actually do it? Okay, we're gonna get into the doing part pretty quickly. Let's talk about the life cycle piece of it in the discover, monitor, and protect phase. So, as I mentioned earlier, that in the discovery phase, you need to run scans on your targets, or just run broad scans, and start tagging and understanding your data. Um, in a monitor phase, you also want to look at, how the data is moving and what is the behavior of that, and maybe have a baseline created. So if there are spikes, you can understand who is accessing that and why. And then obviously protection. We talked about some of those things that even if you do find some data sets that are not right or correct, or maybe there's a malicious piece of a virus in there or something, you should have the ability to block, remove, or quarantine that as well. Okay. And then also in these phases, and you have to be able to, if someone calls you up and says, well, you have my data, I want you to delete it. And if there are privacy laws that you are required to delete within a certain time period, you should be able to go across these networks and databases and be able to delete that as well. So keep that in mind. Um, One of the biggest thing in cloud is velocity, and velocity means that there's too many things changing. There's too many things happening in the cloud. There's too many users involved. Yes, you may have a governance process in place, but at any given point, you need to take a snapshot of the entire environment and synthesize it for your specific business need, which is data governance, and understand how the compliance frameworks are applied to those sources. So you're going to need a control framework to be able to work with. You're gonna have to have continuous monitoring and automation to be able to manage that. And you also going to have to connect into your CI/CD automation as well, especially from a data access standpoint. So all those things are pretty critical. Uh, so overall security governance for the cloud, you need to start with your set of best practices and granular corporate policies. That's all around data access, firewalls, access, encryption, IAM, and all. And you need to be able to observe that, especially on data sets that are marked private or compliance driven. Second is, once you have those policies in place, you need to enforce those policies, and not just enforcing in terms of, here's a book you guys go look at, or here's a document, go read it. And when you do create a database, you need to follow this. That's just not going to happen. You need to enforce it through some kind of automation, and you need to be able to do it in real time. So if someone creates a database, you need to immediately scan it to make sure that it maps to your policies that you created earlier. And then after that, you need to monitor the third bullet. You need to monitor and measure risks basically continually across the board, because things can change. Things can get out of policy. Someone may have unencrypted a volume. Someone attach an unencrypted volume to an encrypted volume. All these activities you need to monitor. There are some open source tools that can help you with this, which are fairly complex. There's also commercial tools available that does that. Um, and of course, we are one of those companies that provide some of these capabilities. So key focus areas to reach scale. Now, the other thing you're going to have problem as because you have cloud with velocity, scaling becomes a big problem. Yes, it's okay if you have, if you're doing about 10, 20, $30,000 a month in cloud spend, but what if you start getting into $1 million a year and more, and 2 million, 3 million a year in cloud spend? Now you have velocity, okay? And once you have velocity and scale, uh, then that's where you need to look at these three or four things where you have to have visibility, you have to be able to manage speed and not have humans involved in the middle to reduce, human error and increase speed. And the third one is self-healing, we call it. You should be able to automatically fix the problem, one, before it goes into production. And even if it's in production, you should be able to fix it through automation on the fly by monitoring your policies. So again, having a strong monitoring, governance, automation system in place for all three major clouds is what the call of the hour is all about. And leverage your partners and vendors. I'm sure you have some pretty smart folks in your network. You can also, basically get help and ask them, what does good look like? So from a tooling perspective, where do we start? And, we still need to see the full view of all of our clouds and risks and so on. As you can see, each vendor has its own set of tools for monitoring everything from configurations to OS to log to some self-healing function that you need to write your own scripting. But no one provides risk management function. No one tells you that how risky is your cloud configuration today for that production system X or Y. No one has that. Those are third-party commercial tools that you need to license to be able to produce that type of analysis. Same thing for data governance. Now, from a discovery standpoint, there is monitoring of the PII data usage in the database. Each vendor has its own set of tools, like AWS has the Macy product and so on. Um, that you can turn on. They are fairly expensive, but they do give you some obviously some level of protection. At minimum, you should be scanning them to see which of the databases has privacy data, and then maybe you can turn it off and then tag it, and then use third-party tools, which are much lower cost, to be able to understand the risk and also to be able to monitor any changes to reduce risk and mitigate loss. So most people tell me the look. We don't have we don't have much of a budget, and quite frankly, we don't have much time either, and our expertise are not there yet. So what do we do? Okay, how do we build this? How do we enforce these policies at scales and get going? Okay, so simple steps you could take. Like I said, you need to identify where your data is for PII. You need to tag your data sets. Okay, tagging is important in a cloud because without that, it's very hard to find things. Okay, yes, you can find 800 S3 buckets, but I'm only interested in those S3 buckets that have private data. Well, that could very well be 10 or 20 at best, and you can do that through tagging. Okay, so that's why I said tagging becomes very important. You can also drive automation with tags. So once things are tagged, you can drive automation to say, I want you to scan those 20 S3 buckets and tell me if the life cycle policy is correct, or if the revision is good, turned on, and more importantly, it's not exposed to the internet and so on, and constantly monitor it. So that's your data governance flow. And of course, the last one is you need to collect the data for auditors and for your executives to show that you are meeting compliance. So, some of the examples that people ask, okay, what are these policies look like and where can we start? I think a good starting place for sure is the CIS, Center for Internet Security Controls. They have benchmarks for all three clouds. I'm showing you some sample CIS controls for the AWS environment, but they have the same for Azure and GCP. Take a look at that. Um, it's free. You can download it and you can implement these rules, uh, which you need to code and scripting. And cloud vendors are starting to offer the CIS controls for that. Now, again, the magic word, as I said, it's a starting point. It's not the end game because it doesn't have things like encryption. It doesn't have life cycle policies and so on and so forth. That's something you will have to add, but it's a good starting point. So keep that in mind. Um, so how do we govern how do we govern the S3 bucket, as an example? So here I'm giving an example of, these are all the list of controls that you need to run for your S3 bucket. Does the S3 bucket authenticated read access or write access or full control? Or, does it have, is it publicly accessible? Is it DNS compliant? Is it encrypted? Does it have server-side encryption? So these are some of the rules that we have written down. And these rules are something that you need to program to be able to do governance on any of those. So that's an example of an S3 bucket that's pretty common and applies to everything, whether it's a blob service, whether it's Elasticsearch, RDS, DynamoDB, all of those come in the same play. Give you another example on virtual private cloud, VPC. How do we govern VPC? Because that's the data access layer going in to your resources like databases and so on. Again, same thing. You need to write these custom rules to look at everything, tunneling rules, are the flow logs turned on? I mean, do you have, unrestricted ACL inbounds and outbounds and gateways and private gateways, VPC peering, all these rules, you have to look at. And that's those are two examples I gave you to kind of, basically go by. This is what it takes. It's a complex problem. It's not easy. Um, Now, then once you have, let's say you have the VPC and S3, right? And you have to do this for every single service that you're running that has data attached to it. Once you have that, then you need to compile all this into a database to basically create a risk management flow and to prioritize which data sets we're going to worry about first. So the flow is that you have to, of course, turn on all these things: logs, config, service logs, host-based logs. The hardest one is at the bottom where it says machine metadata and related configuration changes. So all of those are API-based collections. So you have to write those scripts and automations, and that's where you're going to find what's happening with your lifecycle policies of your data, what's happening with the encryption of your data, and so on. All of that goes into policies output collection, and then it goes into policy analysis for governance. And then finally, you should be able to generate a report that looks something like this on the next slide, which says to an auditor, well, for GDPR Article 25, we looked at our access controls and we looked at all the databases like RDSs, S3, load balancers, and IAM audit controls. And there's about 100 resources. Let's say if 200 resources for RDS, and 32 are passing, 232 are in medium risk. So you should be able to generate this type of report, and the roll up of that is either pass or fail for Article 25. That's what it takes to do data governance. It's a lot of data collection, and you really need to understand your cloud footprint as a starting point, its configuration set, and then you need to know how risky are those configurations, and then be able to compile a report like a GDPR report or like a New York Cyber or the California Privacy Act. So there's many to go by. Now, as a quick summary, so that kind of bring it to a conclusion, we try to keep our talk track to about 30, 35 minutes and answer any questions at the tail end. Um, so as a summary, quick checklist is that you need to start with the cloud native tools that are provided to you. Okay. And we put up a matrix on what those tools are all about. You got to be able to pull it all together, and it starts with some organizational responsibilities to have a data protection security officer in place and have a program in place. That whole process could be run through. CIS controls is a good first step, totally, but you should be moving towards the NIST control because you need to build your collection expertise, and you need to pay attention to technologies like DLP, encryption, and configuration monitoring, right? Because all of that ties into your audit trail process and your data governance posture. That's how it's built. So, one of the question you may be asking, okay, so what does Cloudnosis does in this area? So the next 3 minutes, I'm going to give you a quick overview, and then we'll jump into a Q&A session around this. So we have a platform. It's a SaaS platform, agentless, that actually goes in and does continuous scanning and compliance scanning across the board. Um, and we focus on three core pillars: visibility, governance, and compliance. Visibility is all about understanding all of your assets, all of your configurations, and all the risk ratings. Governance is about putting in policies and practice like policy guardrails in place so you can enforce your data governance strategy, your security strategy, your compliance strategy. And then compliance is really kind of the byproduct, which is after we have visibility and governance, we should be able to generate audit reports, risk assessments, and meet compliance across the board. And of course, when something is failing, we do need to remediate as well. So the way we did that is we took each control set and we mapped all of the cloud services and their specific controls that we built from our expertise and from the industry expertise as well, and put that together. And from that, we can build a quick snapshot of your data sets into a dashboard and give you complete visibility around all of your what we call it towers. So compute, storage, database, IAM, all these fabrics. This also includes APIs. It includes all of your services, and then we can very quickly grade them as high, medium, low to what the configuration settings are there, and whether they're high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And from that, we can go further and drill down, tell you what those resources are and how you can remediate them. And we also build out a compliance dashboard for you as well for your cloud environments that shows you exactly what is the cloud footprint, a profile for compliance, what percentage you're compliant in NIST or GDPR or ISO, and so on and so forth. So this kind of gives you an indication of where to focus. It drills down further into a very specific set of detailed reports that you can give it to your auditors, to your executive board, to say that, we are GDPR compliant, and here's the proof, and here are the scan results, and here's the historical results as well that we store. So the reports look something like this, where we give you a quick executive overview of what the summary is, how many resources you have, the status of those resources, risk by region, and risk by class. And also then we break down the regulation and tell you, for example, in access control or audit and accountability in ISO 27001, how are you doing? How many resources are failing and passing, and so on and so forth. So with that, I'm going to open up the chat. Feel free to uh, ask any questions, and happy to answer. Okay, there's a question came in, from a data governance perspective, how long it takes to identify our resources if we were to give you a few cloud accounts, to find out, which databases are affected. So what we do is we scan your databases and then we tell you which one is the most riskiest one and it doesn't meet, like for example, GDPR compliancy, right? We don't have a way of telling you if, out of 50 databases, which of the 10 have compliance data in it, because that's not the level of scan that we're doing. Because we're doing what is called an infrastructure level meta scan. So keep that in mind. Um, you can also feed in by running Macy and tagging it. And after you tag it, then we know, okay, these 10 out of 50 are the ones that are of high risk. And we can drill down and generate reports for that specifically. So hopefully that answered that question. Question around how do you price your platform? Pricing is on our website. You can take a look at it, but it's very simply, we basically charge by instances, and we charge around $9 per instance per month. So definition of an instance is noted. It's compute and databases. It's fairly cost effective. I mean, you could be up and running in a few $100s a month and have your production servers, protected, or production databases. Okay. Question around, what do you do with network traffic? Do you analyze that? So we don't analyze network traffic because we're not a log management company. That's not what we do. We are an infrastructure controls, risk management, a process control company. And so from a network standpoint, we are looking at your endpoints. We are looking at your configurations to making sure that they are protected and have the right set of configurations in place, like load balancers, and have the right cipher levels, and those sort of things. And you have WAF turned on, um, and CloudFront configurations are correct, and so on. What we're not doing is looking at the traffic flow, the IPs that are coming in. Now, we are adding very soon the IOCs, where we can grade those IP addresses and tell you which IP addresses that are entering your environment that's not very good, and you should be able to take a look at. Okay, I think it kind of surpasses our 35-minute mark almost, so I don't see any more questions today. Um, Send us questions on info@cloudnosis.com, and we'll be happy to support that and answer that for you. Thank you for joining today, and get ready for the next great session. It's going to be around data governance as well. Thank you.